thanks for welcoming 7 Stories at the Highline Heritage Museum. Tonight we have 7 storytellers and a full audience, so everybody get ready. I will introduce Deborah, your MC for this evening. Before I do that, one thing we do when every event we have here is to recognize that we are on native land. We'd like to think in honor of those who preceded us here, including the people of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Nisqually, and Muckleshoot tribes. And be glad to answer any questions about the museum on your way out. We'll be out front. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And Deborah?
Welcome everybody to 7 Stories. I'm filling in for Crystal, who can't be here tonight, so if I start stammering, you know that that's why. It's kind of a last minute thing. I have a few announcements. One is we're always looking for volunteers. Sybil does a lot of work for this, and there are other people who help, but if any of you are interested in being a volunteer, we'll have this sign-up sheet out on this clipboard. There will also be a stack of these cards that have the next theme and things like that. So feel free to take this and sign up to be a volunteer. For those of you who haven't been here before, anybody here not been here before? Newcomers? Whoa, a lot. Okay. So this was Sybil Davis, who's over there, used to be part of a storytelling group in Alaska when she lived there. And she,
No, I was in the audience. I never told a story.
well, that's being part of it. I mean, if there's nobody to listen, you're just talking to yourself.
That's true.
Come on.
That is true.
Anyway, so she wanted to start something like that here, and she's put tons of work into it, and we have this. The idea of 7 stories is 7 people tell a story that's 7 minutes long. So we've managed to get it down over the few years we've been doing this, interrupted by COVID, but that is what we do here. It's a story on a particular theme, and we have wonderful storytellers and great audiences. And first I would like to introduce Michael Lockhart. Michael is an engineer who's been lucky enough to go to the UW, work for both Boeing and Microsoft, raise a family right near Burien in Newcastle. When a friend told me that I should tell my usually silly stories at the Moth, I fell in love with the organization and storytelling. I've heard him before. He's a wonderful storyteller. So please welcome Michael.
All right, well, so morphine is great. A cheese Danish is a close second. My mom and I like playing this game. If I had a story to tell, my first line would be, and then we critique each other. And my mom came up with that line last October when we surprisingly discovered she had a golf ball sized glioblastoma brain tumor with only a few weeks to live. And so now my mom is a force of nature, to say the least. That would be the good term that a lot of people use. And so she broke into her usual very big project management mode. So there was a lot of things all of a sudden that came up. We had doctor's appointments and home care and hospice and house projects and finances, and all of these things needed to be taken care of. On top of that, she looked up and found out about this law that I had no idea existed in Washington State called Death with Dignity. And it is a very well-written law giving a person the right to kind of decide when they want to end their, bring everything to an end and when they're done, right? And so my mom and I went through the process. It was this whole thing with the state and the hospice and 2 doctors and a certain pharmacies, and it was very specific in how it had to be carried out. Perfect for my mom and her project management skills. And so we went through that and got ready or prepared that. And around the middle of November, she called me on a Monday night and said, Mike, I've had a particularly bad day and I've decided what day I'm going to utilize this option. And it was going to be the next day, on the morning of the next day. So now my brother and I had been splitting up time, so I happened to be in Seattle. It was my half of the week in Seattle, and my brother was down in Olympia, so we had to get together the next day, and I in my head, I said, okay, this is just a fear thing and probably not, but she did follow through with that wish suddenly, just before Thanksgiving. And but as I was driving down to Olympia that morning, and it was this from here down to Olympia, it was like the most November 15th. It was the perfect day. It was perfect northwest blue sky outside. And I kind of had some time to kind of just think about this and think, oh no, is it going to happen? No, we're not going to do it probably. No, no, yes, no. But it was just a nice day out. And I had thought about a couple weeks before that, when my mom and I had gone out for what was our last outing in public to run errands. And so on this day, she had 3 things on the list. Very specific, project manager. And she said, we need to go to the post office and pick up the mail. And we need to go to the bakery in Olympia, so they're down in Olympia, where we're going to pick up some cheese Danish. And the cheese Danish reference is because tumors and cancer and this kind of thing crave sugar, and her sugar treat was cheese Danish. She wanted that all the time. She hated cheese Danish before this, but she wanted this all the time. So we ended up going to Wagner's Bakery in Olympia, if you know where that is. It's kind of a cool bakery. And the third thing we had to do is we had to go to the bank and pick up $4,000 cash to prepay for the cremation. So we headed out, and we went and picked up the mail, and we picked up the cheese Danish, and then we went over just down the street from the bakery to the bank, where as we walked into the bank, I said, hey Mom, I think you can get $4,000 right out of the cash machine. And she looked at me, and she says, I do not do it that way. And she goes, I said, okay. And so we walked up to the teller, and she pulled out the checkbook and the check register, where she proceeded to write herself a check for cash and filled in the check register. And I was standing behind her, and she took the check and she gave it to the bank teller. And the teller kind of ran it through the little machine. And the teller looked up to her after a moment and said, Mrs. Lockhart, thank you for being such a wonderful, long-time customer of Chase Bank. But my system is telling me this is an unusual amount of cash for you to be removing from the bank. So I'm required to ask you, what are you going to do with the money? Seriously. I was behind her, and I seriously went, oh no. I said, wait for it. I said, you did not just ask an 84-year-old woman with a brain tumor this question. I was like, oh no. Wait for it. Be calm. Wait for it. She looked up at the bank teller, and she said, I am going to spend this money. And what I spend it on is none of yours or Chase Bank's fucking business. Of course, again, I went, oh boy. I did one of these, and I was like, okay. So the bank teller did not know what to do, just gave her the cash. So she takes the cash, and we walk. Oh, it doesn't end there. We walk out of the bank. I didn't say a word. I literally walked out of the bank. I was like, okay, here we go. So we got outside the bank to the car, and as we were getting back into the car, she finally looked over the hood at me. We were getting on each side of the car, and she looked at me and said, what did you think of that? And I said, oh, Mom. The poor woman, she was kind of just doing her job or whatever, so it was like, yeah, and she goes, oh, Mike, you are way too nice. I am an 84-year-old woman with a brain tumor, and I do not have to fucking filter my mouth anymore. So she gave me the So we get in the car, and I'm like, actually, what I said was, well, Mom, you have a valid point. I'm okay with that. So we get in the car, and we're driving home, and she's kind of irritated by this whole thing, and she looks at me and says, by the way, whenever all of this comes to an end, I do not want this thing called a celebration of life. I do not like that term, mostly because the people you would invite, most of my friends from Olympia, they don't even know how to celebrate their own lives. So I don't want any, I want a small get-together, and I'm going to give you the list of people who are allowed to be at this memorial. No weird relatives, no other friends. She literally gave me a short list. And so with that, I said, okay, Mom, I got the deal. However, everything happened so fast in November, and since then, I've liked telling the story because I've said to myself, well, now I have a story that I want to use, and I have a good line for my mom, and it is, I am a 58-year-old man who has never disobeyed his mother. And when my mom said, I do not want a celebration of life, I decided, well, okay, then what I'm going to do is have a not celebration of life party at various times. And so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to gather a group of nice strangers together that didn't know my mom, and we're going to have a spiritual guide here for the evening, maybe Miss Sybil. And all I'm going to say at the end here, and we're going to tell some stories, and the stories some might make us laugh and some might make us cry, but in the end, I'm just going to stand up at the end of the story and say, hey everybody, tomorrow morning when you get up and have your coffee, please go have a cheese Danish and let Sybil or the 7 stories know how it was. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I love that. And I have concocted a visual of your mother. And someday you'll have to show me a picture and see how close I can.
A lot, right like this. It was great. Moms are great. I'll end it with that. Moms are great.
Okay, our next storyteller is a newcomer to 7 Stories. His name is E.J. Blanco. He says that he was the only Cuban he's met in Seattle. The only Cuban he's met in Seattle is in the mirror. And that he won't ever turn down a drink or a conversation. So we'll have to have a mojito sometime with you. So please welcome E.J.
Thank you. So I lied, I brought a Cuban with me. He just moved here a little sooner than I thought. But yeah, so the theme is like being fed up and hitting the breaking point and all that, and the story sort of bookended on both ends by 2 different parties that were fed up, and I feel like it has a happy ending. So we were done with paying rent to a bunch of slumlords in our lives and our circle of friends, and we decided to start living in abandoned houses across the country. And so we squatted all over the place, but there was one that I got invited to in Miami that was right in the middle of condo land, right next to a bunch of houses we had all lived in when we were paying rent. They got bulldozed, and it was awful, and then these condo buildings just kept happening, but there was this one house that my friend opened up, and we moved in there. And we would just hang out on the porch. It had water, we had a propane stove, all that stuff. And we were living fine, except we didn't have electricity, we had running water, and so it was all candlelight every night, and it was pretty romantic and wonderful and good friends, and lots of people were coming through, whatever. But we knew all the neighbors, we knew all their dogs, we knew everybody. Everybody looked like they were running for office, because like every time that they would walk by, I'd be like, oh, is that your dog? Is that Romeo? Oh my God, it's Romeo! And like just like waving at everybody, and we had the best garden in the neighborhood. It was like pretty funny. But just like, I don't know, like, I guess it's criminal or something, but it was, I don't know, it's a very, very, very soft crime, I guess. I don't know, because we weren't doing anything wrong, I don't think. And so we got to know the neighborhood, all that stuff. It was just like, keep watching, like, all these cranes building these awful condos for these, like, locust people that destroyed the city I was born and raised in, and, like, just treat it like garbage. And whatever, we were there, and we were fine. Until one day I'm just sitting on the porch in these booty shorts and no shirt and playing an acoustic guitar with, for some reason I'd found these glasses in the trash that have those fake eyeballs on them. And I'm just playing guitar, minding my own business, everyone's asleep upstairs, and this SUV pulls up with 2 like not so happy people that are pointing at me, and I'm just like, oh shit, what did I do last night? I was like, well, I went out, I'm like replaying it back in my head, because sometimes there's little blips and stuff happens, but I was like, no, I think it was pretty good last night. But they're like keep angrily pointing and like just park in front of the house, and this lady gets out with this other like business lady or whatever, and like they come out and they're fucking pissed, and like she's like, I have a big problem with you. And I was like, what did I do? I don't know you. And she's like walking onto the property, and I'm just like, I have no idea who you are. She's like, I am Jackie Taco. I was like, who the fuck is Jackie Taco? I have no idea. And I look ridiculous, so I'm just like, oh shit, I have no idea what's happening. She's like, I am Jackie Taco, I own this house. I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I was like, so my friend that opened it, I was like, yo, Ed, what's up? And so Ed comes down and starts talking to her. And he's like, no, come on in. Look, we fixed the plumbing. We did this and that. Like, check out the garden. Just showing her around. And she's like, she just went from, like, just irate, like, homeowner to just, like, concerned mother. And, like, I just saw the shift happen. It was amazing. Like, she just went down, like, so many notches. It was amazing. And she's like, okay. And what about this? What about this? And you don't do drugs here? I was like, nah, we don't do any of that shit. And she's like, okay, this is what the deal is. That Brazilian pepper plant, I'm getting fined by the city $100 a day. If you chop that up, maybe we could work something out. I'm like, okay. Like, but we don't have any money. And she's like, we were working, but whatever. But she was like, okay, hold on. And she's like, looking at the porch, and my friend had a sack of like cherry tomatoes that was for the neighbor, because we were like giving the neighbors like everything from the garden and all that. And she goes, let me get that bag of tomatoes. And my friend's like, I don't know, that's for the neighbor. He's like, free rent for tomatoes? He's like, here you go. but when that's happening, it turns out that the business lady that was hanging out with her was her lawyer. Oh. And the lawyer is already shopping for plants. Like, has like 3 pots that she's already got in her hand. And it's like, I'm taking these, taking this, taking the cactus, taking this, and just like shopping. And Ed's like, yeah, take it all. And so it just like de-escalated so fast that it was wonderful. And they kept the house for like a year and a half. But if you would go on these like real estate websites, it would say currently occupied by squatters, will be evicted upon closing. That's how that ended. There was a police raid towards the end, but that was because of some other people. But yeah, that's that. But yeah, thank you.
That was a great story. And I'd like to know, what is it about a Brazilian pepper plant that they're being fined?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
The roof break the sidewalk.
Oh, okay. Anyway, thank you for telling us that. Now, talk about visuals. I got you with those glasses with the eyes coming out. Our next storyteller tonight is Gaylord Sisson. He's a published author, an enthusiastic world traveler. I asked him what his story was about, and he said, I'm not going to tell you. So, let's welcome Gaylord.
Well, the story that I'm not going to tell you what it's about is about why and how I ended up in Burien. Oh yes, it started off with me being in San Diego, of course, because that's where I grew up. And I went to private school, and in high school, my brothers went to a public school. I went to a private school. And all of a sudden I noticed that when my brothers came home, because I didn't have any sisters, when my brothers came home, about 7 or 8 of his new friends, all female, followed him home too. And I went to an all-boys school, so I was going, oh man, maybe I'm in the wrong place. Well, anyway, I finished high school, went to college, and the thing is that my dad is an actor, and he got a Tony Award the same year that he retired from acting. One of my brothers is an actor. All my brothers knew people in the city, but nobody knew me because I was in a private school. And so people would come up and they say, oh, you're Gaylord Sisson? Do you know, I know a man named George Sisson. I say, yeah, that's my dad. Oh, wow. And then they would say, time went by and someone would say, oh, I know Philip Sisson. Are you related to him? Yeah, I'm his older brother. And every time I went someplace relatively new to me, people in San Diego knew my family and knew them, but they didn't know who I was. So, this is going to be a relatively short story. Though the period of time was long, I ended up taking a bicycle trip to Vancouver, Canada, which I talked about last time. and bicycled to San Francisco, and nobody knew me. Wow. Nobody knew me. And so I owned a business in Canada, and I sold that business and thought, I'm going to check out Seattle. And I did. Checking out Seattle meant I met this woman named Kathleen, and now her name was Kathleen Smith. She thought Sasan sounded much better. And that what brought me here, because now I can make myself known as who I am, Gaylord Sasan, also known as Joseph Gaylord Sasan, because I have a book, Down the Road a Piece, and I'm a Burien art commissioner, and I do a lot in the community. And now I feel more comfortable here because no one comes up and say, do you know Mark Sasan? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gaylord. And I definitely got it from now on, Sasan.
Yeah.
Right. We're glad to have you here in Burien. Our next storyteller is Shane Larengo. Shane told a story several years ago for 7 Stories, and we've been wanting her to come back ever since. Her story tonight is a personal one. And I have to tell you, when she told her story the last time, she and I had a little pajama party because she had to schlep all the way back to, where? Port Orchard. Mm-hmm. So she came over to my house and we had a really good time. She's a really fun person who tells great stories. Please welcome Shane Larengo.
And I'm going to give y'all just a minute to get acclimated to this voice. So it actually, it wasn't years ago because I hadn't been up here that long. It was just a few months. But I might start to lose it if I am around enough people, but it won't go away forever. So with the concept of fed up, I am a big girl. I'm 5'9.5", and I have shrunk a little bit. I grew up in a family that had large behinds that we went through, and they called the Clark butt. But looking at my grandpa and his family, it definitely wasn't from that, but it was probably the Hennessy hips that we saw in the woman, you know, and that family line. And as life went on, I just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when you're in the South, it's not that noticeable. But when you get up to the Pacific Northwest, you literally don't fit in. And I got to thinking about, where did this come from and how did this happen? Now, I grew up learning backhanded compliments, and one that could be said about me was that, she doesn't look like she's missed many meals. And I have not. I have come from a very privileged moment in my family history that I never went without food unintentionally. I cannot say that about my daddy. They were poor, they lived in the city, and they were hungry. Hungry, hungry, hungry. In fact, he tells a story, and he was still in single digits, but I'm not sure exactly how old he was, that they went and did work as children and got paid in food. And to show you how far this legacy goes back, when they brought it home to their mama because they wanted to share with everybody, their mama put it up on top of the cabinet to save it. And Daddy said he just remembered watching it rot away because their mother thought there would be a worse time just up ahead. So my daddy, when he got grown and he started working, probably there's a discrepancy whether he quit school at 6th grade and lied about his age and started to work at Dr. Pepper, or if he quit school at 8th grade, lied about his age and started to work at Dr. Pepper. But by the time I came around, which I was his third family, he had enough money that food was on the table every day, and the main course was the meat and 2 veggies. But I didn't like meat when I was a kid, which I found out things later. But But my daddy was a part of the Clean Your Plate Club because, by God, he had worked so hard to get this food to put on the plate. You were going to eat every last bit of it. And since I've grown up, I found out it's really important for your body at a really young age to learn how to regulate itself and to know when it's hungry and to know when it's full, to know the satiation feeling so that you can stop, because it's a very complex organism that we live inside. So that all worked out great until we moved to town. And I say to town because I grew up down a mile-long dirt road with 40 acres. We didn't have the mule, but we did have horses and cows and chickens and all this other kind of stuff. And then we moved to San Antonio, to the city. And I was not allowed to go outside and play because somebody was going to snatch me. And what happened is I kept eating that same amount, but didn't run, didn't ride my horse, didn't play with my dogs, didn't play with the neighbors who you had to like run a half a mile to go play with the neighbors kind of thing. And I started getting fat in 3rd grade. And that was the kind of the nicest term. There was lots of them, but that was the nicest one. And by the time that I was in high school, my mother, who had grown up on a farm, who had had so much to eat that she got to pick her favorites. She loved watermelon, but she hated cantaloupe. And she would throw the cantaloupe outside to the dog. They even had dogs that they could feed, which was a totally different kind of lifestyle than my dad grew up with. But she decided that once I got to high school, I was too big to have a successful life as the trophy wife that she was thinking I should be. So she started to restrict my calories so much. And it wasn't just her, it was society. So we had this thing going, but it was almost like self-induced torture with the lack of food that I had probably from high school to college. And I was a young mother, married early, the whole thing. Gained 100 pounds with my daughter because I had the excuse I was eating for 2. I hadn't eaten in like 6 years. So I'm eating it up. And then I walked around forever going, I just still haven't lost the baby weight. But the baby's 34 years old and has 2 children of her own now. But I think about that. And I think about then, once you get in that cycle of the processed foods and the sugars and your body becoming addicted to these things, that even when you try to have it up here, that you want to do something different, here is something else. And the other day, and I'm going to tell y'all how things go, because I'm also living alone now that I've moved up here, and I have to talk to somebody. So guess what? It's going to be me. And I was telling my mouth the other day, I know you want to eat this, but you really need to have a conversation with your stomach because your stomach is full. Can you feel it? Can y'all talk to each other? Can y'all let me out of it and start to communicate again? Is there a way that we can build that process back? Hopefully we can. Hopefully we can. But it's another hurdle. My mama's passed. My daddy's passed. All those pressures, for me, the societal pressures have passed. I'm way over them. But now I'm left with just me and a new learned behavior that I should have learned as a child, And how do you teach yourself how to do that once you're grown? And I believe it's possible. I really, really do. And so changing the way that I eat and my relationship with food. And so that when I am fed up, I'm just fed up enough to be satiated.
Wow, what a story. I'll never forget that picture of the food up rotting to save it for something. There's so much food waste in our society, and wow. So, thank you. Okay, next we have Fred Swanson. Fred really enjoys being a dad. He's also a published writer of short stories and award-winning poetry. Fred, please welcome Fred.
So in 6th grade, I was cast in the role of Mitchell in our elementary school production, Coming of Age. Coming of Age was a musical about puberty. Why our drama coach in elementary school thought it was a good idea to have 6th graders sing about puberty in front of their parents and friends, I'm not quite sure. But nevertheless, I was pleased to be cast as Mitchell, and my solo began like this. Please don't tell me about the birds and the bees, the little tiny creatures flitting round in the trees. They don't talk about us, why do we talk about them? Leave them up in a hive or out on a limb. Mitchell was fed up with puberty. I was not fed up with puberty because in 6th grade I hadn't started puberty yet. I did have a girlfriend, however, Stephanie Barnes, who was beautiful and smart and really, really good at roller skating. And so on Friday nights we would go to the roller skating parties and we would couple skate to Wham's Careless Whisper and then later Father Figure. Stephanie had a dog that was part Cocker Spaniel and part Poodle, and I don't remember the name of the dog, but I do remember that they called it a cockapoo, and that was a funny thing to say in 6th grade. The next stanza of the song went, please don't tell me about the facts of life. I've got myself a mother, why do I need a wife? If those are the facts, then I'll take fiction. What happens to me is not for your prediction. It wasn't great music, and the gender roles were kind of messed up. But I couldn't predict when I was going to start puberty, but I knew it was something that was inevitable. I can tell, though, by looking back at my school pictures when it started, because in 6th grade we have this country roads background with a water wheel, and there's a fence prop, and I'm leaning on it and smiling big, and my skin is clear, and I had discovered that lemon juice gives you highlights in your hair, and so I was kind of beachy and happy, looked really good, as opposed to 7th grade, where my picture, I'm sweaty, my hair is a mess, I've got braces, and this thing called a butterfly on the front of my braces, and I can't really manage a smile, I'm just kind of, grimacing, and then I've got cystic acne covering my face. And so if you're familiar with cystic acne, it's basically your body creates these nodules under your skin. They never come to a head, they never go away, they just kind of like retract a little bit and then they come back and you don't know when. In any case, it was not a cute picture, and that was the beginning of my puberty, which I soon became fed up with. My mother took me to the dermatologist to help deal with the cystic acne, and they prescribed what was then a new drug called Accutane. Accutane, you had to sign a waiver that said you would not get pregnant or impregnate someone while you were on the pill, and to drive that point home, they wrapped each individual pill in a pregnant woman with an X through her. There was no risk that I was going to impregnate anyone in 7th grade, but to make sure of that, the side effects of Accutane made me so hideous that it was impossible that anyone was going to want to be impregnated by me. So my skin on my hands turned green, and it just peeled over and over while I was on the pills, and then my lips were so dry and cracked and kind of bloody that I put Vaseline on them like all the time. So I was walking around, it looked like I had gone to Krispy Kreme and gotten one of those glazed raspberry-filled donuts, and I just didn't wipe my mouth after eating it. In any case, it was awful. 7th grade, I also started a new school. I started junior high. We moved to a new neighborhood, and so I was trying to meet new people and looking really awful. Thankfully, Ann Norris Graham befriended me at the bus stop. She became my best friend. Ann had a bowl cut, and so she was blonde on top and then like dark brown around the sides. Very cool girl. She listened to the Beatles and the Thompson Twins, and she had a friend named Shannon Smith, who I also became friends with. Shannon was very emotional, and she wore a lot of makeup. And so when she would cry, which happened often, the tears would go through her makeup and then puddle on her crew neck sweatshirts in these kind of clouds of orange brown. Shannon also had an older brother who had a Pontiac Fiero, which was this wedge-shaped two-seater kind of sports car. Like, it wasn't fast enough to be a sports car, but very cool. But unfortunately, she would tell people that it was a Ferrari. And so when we would call her out on that, she would cry, and then the clouds. It was a mess. So the third stanza of the Mitchell song went, "Please don't tell me about the birds and the bees. I'll cover my ears, I'll crawl on my knees. Please don't tell me about the facts of life. I'll commit harakiri with my Boy Scout knife." Again, not great lyrics, kind of culturally insensitive, and I don't know, like singing about teen suicide is not really great either. I did make it through. Mitchell made it through puberty. I made it through the role. I eventually made it through puberty, so thankful for that. And I can say now that having a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 17-year-old, I've had to go through puberty 3 more times. And I do think that those early experiences put me in a good place to be a good dad and supportive of them in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that musical ever performed again, or was that a one-time kind of thing? Wow, I think we can all relate to that in some way. I can for the acne, but I think I was before Accutane, so I was spared the green palms and things like that. Our next storyteller is Daniel Kimani. Daniel was born in Kenya and raised in a village and the city. His story is about running away from home. Please welcome Daniel.
First of all, I'm very glad that our Gaylord and Kathleen visited Kenya 2 months ago, and they told me that their perspectives about life changed. So maybe if you're thinking about going to Africa, please consider Kenya. I have been traveling in the forest for about 2.5 hours. I'm tired, I'm hungry, but I am really grateful that I was not eaten by a lion or maybe kidnapped by a stranger. But what makes it so exciting is the sight of a village from a distance that I'm running into for refuge. I'm hoping that this village is gonna be where I'll get happiness, I'll get a sense of belonging, and I'll get love that I'm really looking for. Let me tell you how I got here. I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning, got dressed up in my school uniform. I'm 7 years old. Everybody thought I was gonna go to school, but I wasn't. I had a different idea. I was gonna run. I was gonna run away. Where am I gonna go? I had an aunt who lived 2.5 hours away. The only way to get there was walking through the woods for 2.5 hours. At this point of my life, I live with my aunt, but there's a bigger problem. My aunt has 12 children of her own. And my uncle Tommy, both of them have no school. They never went to school, just like my mother. Society back in the days did not believe in educating women. Looks like somebody forgot to tell them that if you educate a woman, you enlighten the whole village. So I'm here. I live with my aunt, and the reason is because my family was kicked out of our ancestral land by a rival tribe. My aunt, my uncle, they're extremely poor. Eating is a problem, clothing is a problem, housing is a problem, all which are human basic rights. Other than that, I have a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is my uncle, Tommy. My uncle Tommy is brutal, and he's also a drunkard. He drinks every day, and he beats the hell out of me. I believe that he beats me because I'm not his own biological son. So that makes me feel unimportant. It makes me feel I'm not wanted. And I'm gonna make that stop today. So I'm here. For the last 2.5 hours, I've been traveling in the forest. So many thoughts have been going on in my mind. I've been trapped in my own little world. I'm angry at my mother for dumping me here. I'm also angry at my uncle. Angry at God for letting me go through all that at 7 years old. The only company that I had the whole time was the trees, the bushes, the colobus monkeys jumping from tree to tree, trying to scare me, but I'm not scared. I walk to school every day for 10 miles. I'm cold, I'm hungry. Sometimes it gets so cold that I have to pee on the ground, step on the pee, warm myself up, and get going. I know, it's gross. But as a 7-year-old, I call that genius. Using available resources to solve your own problems. So, while I'm in the forest, so many things happen. I keep going. And at some point I meet strangers. Some of them did not pay any attention. They didn't care about this 7-year-old in school uniform by himself, except one stranger. The stranger stops me dead in the middle of the woods, and he goes, "Boy, where are you going?" Obviously, I had come up with a lie. I told him that my teacher sent me out in the woods to collect different plant species for my science project. He looked at me and goes, "Really? By yourself? You're lying." He let me go. And as much as he wanted to help, it was almost impossible for him to help. There's no phone, there's no child protective services, there's no 911, so he can't help me. So I'm here, at the end of my journey. I'm ready for the grand entrance into the home, Auntie Jenny's home, where this is the last hope. She is my salvation. So I proceed, open Aunt Jenny's gate, and I see no one. I keep walking towards her house, and I'm confronted by an angry woman, Auntie Jenny. "You little criminal, what are you doing here in your school uniform, looking miserable? In case you're running away from your Uncle Tommy, be sure I'll make them get you back in the next 24 hours. And I knew I had screwed up really bad. Sure enough, my brother Peter shows up the following morning and drags me back home. The story of my escape had spread across the village. And my relatives, the society was waiting for what's going to happen. As soon as I get back home with my brother Peter, my relatives are relieved that I'm alive and in one piece. My Uncle Tommy, not only is he relieved, he's shocked that I was able to pull such a move. But what I realized is that he gave me more, he treated me better and gave me more respect. I realized that I could use my power as a 7-year-old to make him change how he treated me. And more importantly, to me as a 7-year-old, I was a hero of the village. I was the boy who lived, the boy who walked for 2.5 hours in the forest by himself and came back alive. And so, looking back to those days, I realized that I and everyone here in the audience has the power to change your life by using that little power or little confidence that you have in yourself. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Dan. What a powerful story. A 7-year-old in the woods by himself. I will think of that when I think life is too hard. I will think of that little boy walking. And I so wanted Aunt Jenny to be nice to you. Bummer. And I do like that. You educate a woman, you enlighten the whole village. That's a good line. Someone wasn't able to make it, so I'm going to tell a story that I told last week at a different venue. So it's not necessarily on the theme, but who cares? So, growing up, I dreamed of living in a city because I could do all the cool city stuff there. So when my husband and I moved to Seattle, my dream came true. I would get on the bus every week to go downtown. I would go to museums. I'd go through the market. I would wander around. And my husband and I, in the evenings, would go to Jazz Alley a lot. And on weekends, we would explore all the different neighborhoods and try new restaurants, go to movies. And I think for the first 6 months that we lived up here, no matter where we went or what we did, we would look at each other and we'd go, how cool are we? Because we were no longer the bumpkins living in the Central Valley of California. We were living in the city. We were living the dream life until COVID. I didn't go into Seattle for 2 years. Once things started opening up, I heard such gruesome stories of things happening downtown, vandalism and violence and crime. It just didn't sound very inviting. One day I was out walking with a neighbor, and she got a call from a friend, and he said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to meet you this afternoon. I'm at the hospital with my mother. Someone took her and threw her down the stairs at the light rail station in the ID. So it was with trepidation that I first went back into downtown Seattle with some friends. Thank you, Linda. And it was okay. So I started taking myself on little adventures like I used to before COVID. This time I'd go on light rail all over, get off at different places. Last fall on Veterans Day, a friend who had the day off and I agreed to meet at Seattle Art Museum to hang out. So I got to light rail. I like to give myself plenty of time. I was just stepping onto the bottom step of the escalator that goes up to where the train comes when I heard it pull in. So I ran up, and as I was running up, I heard one of these announcements that I couldn't make out what they were saying. But I got up there, the door was open, I jumped on, and I sat down next to some young guy. We took off, and I said, excuse me, what was that announcement? I just couldn't understand what they were saying. And he said, please, can you repeat? And I got it. He's not an English speaker. Well, the people who were standing next to us had heard this whole thing, and they said, okay, they're working on the tracks today, so we all have to get off at Sodo, and then they'll have buses that will take us, shuttle us back into the city to the different things. I thought, okay, great. So I had to explain it to him. We started chatting, and I found out he was a guy from Japan with a 3-hour layover at the airport. So he was taking light rail to that mecca of Seattle, the original Starbucks in the market. Well, when I heard that, I said to him, I'm going to take you right there because with this whole business with the tracks and the bus, you don't really have that much time. So we get to the market, and I said, I want to show you just a few things first. So I took him over to Rachel the pig, and he's kind of stroking it, and I said, hey, give me your phone. So he took off his phone, he gave it to me, and I said, okay, and he went, and I took his picture. And then I said, see in there? And he goes, yeah, and I said, that's where they throw the fish. He goes, throw the fish? He'd read about Seattle. So we went in, and he's standing there so excited, and I'm there like, yeah, throw the fish already. They're not throwing any fish. And finally I said, you know what, let's move it on. We can come here after Starbucks. But I took him through the market just so he'd see it to get to Starbucks. And it was so alive. It was filled with people because it was a day off. And they were happy. And they were well behaved and smiling. And it was just such a nice vibe. We went outside. There's the guy who plays the piano on the sidewalk, so there was music, and people were walking around, and I just felt myself go from the black and white of Kansas into the Technicolor of Oz. I just thought, wow, this is so vibrant and colorful. It feels better than it did even before COVID. So we get to Starbucks, and the line goes on for blocks. And I said, you know what? You're not getting in there. Let me just take pictures of you in front. He goes, okay. So he gave me his phone. Well, he goes, selfie. The two of us took a selfie. And because I got some chutzpah, I stuck my head in the door, and I said to an employee, I met this nice guy on the light rail. He's from Japan. He's on a layover from the airport. He just wanted to come down here. I'm not asking that he jump the line to go in and get coffee or buy anything. Can he just come in and take some pictures? And she said, sure, come on in. So he went in. Next thing I know, he's in there. He's like a movie star. They're taking pictures of him with all the different employees holding the cups and everything. And he came out walking on air. He was so happy. He'd made the pilgrimage successfully. So we went back, waiting for the fish, no fish. And I said, let's just move it on. So we exited the market through De Laurentiis, really nice, fancy Italian food store. When we walked in, he went, pasta! And I said, Mamma mia! And we just walked through looking at everything and all the food and stuff, and walked out onto First, started walking down, and I went, and we looked down, and there at our feet was a black bird, but it was covered with gold spots that were sparkling and gleaming. It was like something out of a fairy tale. It was like seeing a unicorn on the sidewalk on First. Just one more magic element of this day. So next stop, Fran's, the chocolate store. So we went in there, and I said, hi, I met this really nice young man on light rail, and I'm showing him around downtown. Are you sampling anything today? And she said, why, yes. We've got our signature chocolates, caramels, with a salt. So she gave him one, gave me one, I gave him mine. He's there eating them saying, these are so good. Thank you. And she said, oh, thanks for coming in. It was great. I hope you get to come back for a real visit, Seattle. We went out, and he said to me, people in Seattle are really nice. And I said, yeah, they are. I had 2 more stops for him. I took him into the lobby of the museum to see the big tree that's suspended up there. Give me your phone. Look at the tree. Then Hammering Man. I think I did a video because it was in motion. And then I took him to the bus because he had to get back to the light rail in the airport. And he said, thank you. That was the best tour I've ever had. And I said, thank you. I mean, I'm so happy to have met you and be able to show you this and see it through your eyes. And we said goodbye. I met my friend, and a few hours later, I'm back at the bus stop. It's time for me to go to the light rail. And I'm still high on this morning I've had, and it just was really so exciting. But I'm also tired at this point, and I'm hungry because I never got around to eating lunch. But the bus pulled up, yay! Magical Mystery Tour continues. It was packed. It was like sardines. There was no way I could get on this bus. So I had to wait for the next one, and they said, it'll just be 20 or 30 minutes, and I thought, oh man, and I felt my spirits just dropping. And I said, nope, stay with it, just focus, think of the morning, and it brought me back, and like magic, a bus with 6 people pulled up just a minute later. Got on, get to the light rail, and we're all standing there waiting for the train to come, and I could not help but notice the man with the enormous box of Krispy Kreme donuts. And now that would not be my first choice of something to eat, but I was so hungry I could have eaten the whole box of donuts. So, okay, the train comes, we get on. I got a seat next to the window, and I look over, there's Donut Guy just standing there in the middle with this humongous box of donuts. To distract myself, I looked out the window for a few minutes. I looked back, and there's a light rail uniformed employee there eating a donut and smiling, and the donut guy's smiling, and I thought, well, that was nice of him. I looked out the window some more, and I looked back, and there was this homeless guy there eating the donut and saying, oh man, it's so good. And the guy opened the box, he said, here, please take some more. And the guy looked, and he reached in, and he took one, and he said, thanks, man. I was so touched by this scene. And I realized that if I had been 10 seconds later that morning getting to light rail, I wouldn't have met the Japanese guy. And if I had shoved my way on that crowded bus, I might not have seen this donut guy. This whole day, starting and ending on light rail, of all places, had just restored my faith in people and given me hope that Seattle was going to be okay, we were going to be okay. I just looked at all these strangers on light rail, my heart filled with love, and I said to myself, hey Seattle, how cool are we? Thank you. That is our last story. I enjoyed sitting right up here. I got to be right up in front looking at people, and it was just such a thrill to hear these stories and see their faces up close as they told them. So thank you to everybody for coming and telling your wonderful stories. You know, it's not easy to get up in front of a group of people and tell something personal about yourself, but wow, what a night we had. So keep this in mind for those of you who didn't tell a story, come back and tell a story. Those of you who told a story, come back and tell another one. And you know what? Like tonight, my story wasn't really the theme. Who cares? You can get up here and tell a story. We'll all enjoy it. Thank you again. Good night.